I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, Stephen Finlay Archer weaves a captivating tale in a book called Searchers, The Irish Clans. It is the first in a series that bridges the gap between historical 1915 Ireland and America, exploring the intricate connections of transplanted Irish families and the mysteries of their ancient clans. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Authors Reputation Press for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. I'm happy to be here.
Loved your book. I'm an Irish American. I've studied the clans a little bit. I know more about the Crawford clan, which was a pretty distinguished clan than the Logan clan. Those are my two family names. But it is of interest to the Irish diaspora, which is even larger than the country of Ireland. What inspired you to look into the interconnected worlds of 1915 Ireland and America?
Well, first of all, I'm Irish. My background is Irish. And so both my parents were English teachers, so that helped. And my grandfather came over from Northern Ireland to Toronto, Canada, in 1911. And so I'm trying to honor them, I guess, by writing. That wasn't what I did my career, but it's what I'm doing now as a second career. And and so and by the way, my grandfather and my mother are in my novels,
Yeah.
so it's a bit of memoir as well. But the main reason that I decided to write about the Irish Revolution was that there's a very great similarity between, although it was 2 centuries later, between the Irish fight for freedom from England and our own in the United States. And so by immersing my characters in the 20th century revolution from 1915 to 23 in Ireland, I'm hoping that they will see the struggles that the Irish went through during this period, and as a result, reflect back on our own situation and our own constitution and how important our democracy is in a time when all of that is being challenged. And I started writing this in 2012. The first novel was finished in 2016. And I was concerned in those days, but I'm obviously more concerned now. So,
what was your research like for this book?
pretty extensive. I think that what I learned is that if you're going to write historical fiction, you better get the history right. You only have to make a few mistakes, and the history buffs reading it are going to go, "Oh no, that's not right." On the other hand, history is written by the victors, so the internet's a great opportunity, but you just can't go to Wikipedia and say, "Okay, what happened?" because that may not be correct. So I've been back to Ireland 3 times to do research to make sure of my facts before I put them in print. And so it's a the other thing I would say is that in my novels, I'm not only immersing fictitious characters in the history, I'm also taking historical characters and putting them into the fiction. And I'm not sure I lost the video here.
I'm still here, so don't worry about that. You're in good shape.
Okay. Can you see me? Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
So fine. So I had to be very careful, not only to get the history right, but also if I'm using a historical person, to make sure their character, I understand that, so that if I have them doing something fictitious, then I'm not maligning their character. So there's a lot of research that went into it, and still does. And by the way, you have to be careful. The internet is a double-edged sword, because what may be known about a certain subject on a given day when you're writing the novel may change as more is written about it, and you don't want to find out that you wrote something that was totally in error. And I did have that situation in the first book, where I found out something and I had to change 3 chapters about 2 months before the book was published because I found out something that I needed, my story would have negated. So I had to change it.
Tell us about the fact that this is a series. This is book one. Are other books available? How many books do you envision? And why is a series needed to tell the story?
Okay. Well, listen, first, there are 8 novels in the series.
Mhm.
5 of them are now published. The 6th one is completed and going to have its book launch here in October.
Great.
The 7th one I'm pretty much written, and the 8th one is obviously outlined. Um, it's a series kind of like the Outlander series, where you really need to look at it from the beginning to the end in order to get the perspective of what is a family epic saga that goes over a period of time. And it doesn't mean to say you couldn't pick up book 3 and enjoy it, but really you get the most out of it if you're going to read the first book and go all the way through. I think that why does it take eight books to write the story? It's a complex story
Hmm.
that has both a complex history and a complex fictional element. So the Irish Revolution is a very compacted version of our own, because there was a revolt like the Boston Tea Party. Then there was a War of Independence, which we had, and then we had our Constitution, and then we went 100 years, and then we had a civil war. In the case of Ireland, they went immediately into a civil war because the agreement that was reached with Britain at the end of 1921, after the War of Independence, um, didn't have unanimous approval by the rebels. And in fact, they were split 50-50. And so as a result, they immediately went into a year and a half civil war. So I have to tell that whole story with my characters embedded in it. And from a fictional point of view, my story goes back to the early time of the clans, to the religious saints in Ireland following St. Patrick, and and even beyond that. And so it involves um, the the British conquering Ireland in the beginning of the 17th century, and it has draws some religious um, doctrine um, questions that might be out of a Dan Brown novel, kind of, that relate to how what happened historically relative to what they're searching in my story.
Yeah.
So so it takes quite a few novels to get to the end of it, and there's
Well,
several treasures being found and so forth.
exactly. And
I
the
probably
searching
didn't.
is both internal and external, of course. It's a metaphor. Have you envisioned these films, these books as movies or a TV series? It seems kind of epic. It seems like it would work as a series of movies or a TV series.
Yeah, well, so my readers are all, like it, and they go, "Hey, this ought to be on Netflix." This
Mm.
is. I had a publicist for a year, and she said, "Well, this is very episodical. Book 1 you can get 16 episodes out of it, and book 2 you can." And so that's why I contacted Author Reputation Press in
Mhm.
order to see if there was a potential interest in the story, and they are, looking into that for me and creating book trailers and movie script coverages and that kind of thing.
Wonderful.
Um, I prob I probably didn't give you a little bit of a background on the story, which I should. I
Go
jumped
ahead,
right
please.
into saying that there's treasure hunts. Um, if you do a comparison of, they always ask, well, what do you compare your work to in terms of things we might know? Well, I mentioned the Outlander series earlier. I hadn't actually read the Outlander series when I started writing, but it's fairly similar in terms of it's instead of a Scottish family, it's an Irish family or Irish clans. Also, it's like the National Treasure movies with Nicolas Cage because I'll tell you about that in a second, but it's a little different because in the Nicolas Cage National Treasure movies, most of the clues are made up. They're, whatever, the clay pipe in Alaska or whatever. But in my case, all of the clues are relics of the Gaelic civilization that actually survived the British onslaught and are also associated with the two main clans that I'm talking about, which are the O'Donnell clans in the Northwest and the McCarthy clans in the Southeast and Southwest, I should say. So I'm hoping that when people finish reading my novels, they're going to scratch their head and say, now, was this historical fiction or have we uncovered history? So that's sort of the background. And the storyline as it starts is that in 1600, there were three major clans still fighting the British. The British were taking over parts of Ireland and about to conquer them. And so the O'Donnell clan in the Northwest and the McCarthy clan in the Southwest were two of those clans. And so I get my two characters, the two chieftains, together in Donegal Castle in 1600, and they say, look, this is not going well, and we need to squirrel away our wealth of 1,000 years because they've been ruling in these areas for 500 to 1,000 years, and we'll put those away in places of religious significance to us each individually, but we'll pass talismans down to our firstborn, north and south, so that when the time is ripe for revolution, they'll come together and find the clues, find our treasures, and use them for the revolution. So that's the kind of premise of what starts the whole thing. And I've got a character, an O'Donnell character in Toronto, and I've got a McCarthy character in Ireland, and that's what ends up starting the whole process.
The first book is called Searchers, the Irish Clans. It's the first in a series that bridges the gap between historical 1915 Ireland and America. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much, Logan. I really appreciate the time talking to you and your listeners.
I enjoyed our conversation as well. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.